Welcome to Beyond the Closing Table with Setco Services. In this podcast, we delve into the world of real estate and explore what happens beyond the closing table. Join us for insightful discussions and expert interviews that will change the way you see real estate transactions. Welcome to Beyond the Closing Table. I'm George Brandon Jr., sponsored by Setco Services. Today, I have Michelle Anchors. How are you, Michelle?
I'm happy to be here, George Brandon.
Thank you for being here. Also, outside counsel for Setco Services. Just full disclosure up front. We appreciate that about you. Y'all do a wonderful job.
Well, we got our favorite clients, I admit. Just like teachers don't like to admit they have their favorite pets, we got ours too.
Well, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I probably had to earn that to some extent. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. But
we appreciate people.
I'm always in trouble. Yeah. How about that?
People with needs. We're there for you, George.
Thanks. So, but before we get into like the legal side of life, I want to know, where did Michelle grow up? Where are you from?
Fort Walton Beach, Florida.
Okay. I might have known that, but still, not everybody out there does. So you grew up in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, well before any of this stuff we're sitting out here was out here. And Fort Walton Beach was probably a little smaller too.
So it was a cool beach town. And I was lucky to have parents who had grown up in the Niceville, Crestview area, and grandparents who lived there and great-grandparents who lived there.
Your family's been here that long?
Yeah. And
really?
So for me, when I did decide to move back here, there was very much a sort of gravitational pull of not just the people, but my soul kind of wanted to come back to this salty place.
Family. So wait, you're right. You're
lots
fourth
of
generations.
I quit counting, George.
Okay.
There's lots of levels.
Well, do you know how they got to this area originally?
South Georgia. They didn't go far.
Okay, fair enough. They just migrated down. Were they like in timber? I mean, there was nothing here back then.
There wasn't. But they all kind of found their way. My grandfather and his family, after everybody has a little bit of time in the soil, I think in some way, there's going to be some element of farming. And then he opened up a car dealership in Crestview, really before roads had been. There were roads, but he was on the road board and was a critical part of bringing more transportation infrastructure to Northwest Florida. And it was in my young 20s before I realized, well, it made sense. He was selling cars. He wanted more pavement.
Yeah.
And it was good for him. And but I was in an interesting situation, I guess, that I'm the product of two grandfathers who were very close friends.
Okay.
And so that's how my parents met. But they were both Crestview grandpas. And so.
Does the dealership still exist?
In different forms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody bought it.
Yeah. Different forms.
Okay. That's pretty cool though. Yeah. I could understand why Granddad might want to have additional infrastructure if he's selling cars.
Right. American cars were always what we had before we even knew there were such things as Japanese vehicles. And they didn't ever get past us. We were always, driving the oldest jalopy in the garage. But it was a great place for me to grow up.
So did you grow up in Crestview or Fort
Walton Beach?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How was it?
I had a childhood that wasn't perfect, but it was my version of happy in that I did have the benefit of grandparents and lots of aunts and uncles and a community that was small, and yet there is some diversity. I mean, I think being able to go to a public elementary school and public middle school and public high school, and there were no other options for the most part. I mean, very rare would it be that you would find somebody who went to a private school because public schools in Okaloosa County were so strong. And so it wasn't until I went away to college that I realized not everybody got to go to school with kids that came from all different economic backgrounds and all kinds of different, some were military, some were Black, some were white, some were Vietnamese. And so even though Fort Walton Beach is no New York City, I think that we all were kind of leveled out in the place where I grew up, and appreciated each other for who we were and not what we had.
That's awesome. The military presence has been in that area for ever, World War II, basically. That's a big factor, the diversity, you think? I think still.
I do.
Today.
And when I moved back as a young adult to Fort Walton Beach, I counted 17 Thai restaurants. And that has to be the highest per capita ratio of Thai restaurants outside of Bangkok to the number of people that live there.
I love it. All right. So where did you go to middle school and high school, and how was it?
I went to Bruner Middle School and Fort Walton Beach High School.
Okay.
And was all in. I was very spirited, loved the people that I went to school with, and I, had gone to school since first grade with many of them, and still consider a lot of them to be some of my closest buds today.
Really?
Yeah.
Stay connected.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, would you play sports?
I'm 5'1". I'm short. I'm stocky. I have no natural genes that help me do anything fast, and no eye coordination to catch a ball. But I do like things that do not involve gravity, like water. So I was a swimmer, and so started out in a swim team as a youngin. Just probably if you go underwater. You're quiet for a couple of hours. And despite of me being an extroverted person now, there was a time as an elementary student, I was extremely shy. And that is probably the thing most people find hard to believe about me now. Mm-hmm. But I liked being underwater. It was quiet. And I could be by myself. And we swam for a couple of hours at a time. And took a little break in middle school, found it again in high school, and but never excelled as an athlete. But I did grit my teeth and try hard.
Okay.
I would be like the team chaplain. I would be the team spirit leader. But I did show up for practice. I was very disciplined I wouldn't miss, and I tried hard.
What did you play? Just swim?
I played swimming.
You played
swimming. I played in the water.
Well, sorry. Okay, got it. They had a swim team?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I will say to this day, it is a sport that continues to serve me now. Yeah. And I mean, I'm still a swimmer, and probably better at it now than I was then, just because less people do it. And I'm still finding my way to the water.
Believe it or not, Michelle, I was a swimmer.
I do believe it.
My mom teaches swim lessons and all that jazz, but do you not know that?
No.
Oh, she's become a local celebrity here in South Walton as far as teaching kids to swim, young kids. But we did swim team. So, your description of your stature and everything, I'm fat and bulky, and I still did it. So we can all be good swimmers, and I love swimming.
I think swimming is not only just for water safety in the coastal place like where we live. Even if you didn't live in a coastal area, water safety and what your mom does is valuable.
Very.
And also, though, for those who do find swimming as an extracurricular sport, I don't have anything to compare it to for me, but I do think it teaches a really unique form of discipline, because you just got to do a lot of it yourself. There's nobody else who can push you along. You can't throw the ball to somebody else. You're on your own in there, and it's up to you to do what is asked of you. So I would say, even as a mediocre swimmer, it served me really well in a lot of ways as I went through the rest of my life.
Still sports, and you got teammates, and it's a very individual sport, but you have relays too. I mean, I think any sport gives you drive is good. So, okay, high school, we're a swimmer. Clearly did pretty good in grades.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I did. But I feel like I get a little more credit for smarts than I'm naturally imbued with. I think, again, whatever I have comes from getting after it. More so than maybe the DNA that I got given. I think
probably why we get along, you and I. But, I like hard work. But you can't just, let's just don't shun that. I mean, you did okay in high school, right?
I did.
Okay. So,
and I was a little Miss Sunshine, I was a busybody at an early age and
ball of energy. I love it.
Enjoyed doing things that needed doing. And I liked, again, as I said, the people that I went to school with. And so I was somebody that was color coding my calendar in 10th grade for different kinds of activities would be in different colors.
Okay, we were different in some aspects.
I was probably also a little bit of, striving to be, to do well. But I think most of it came from hard work, not an IQ.
Did you? Okay. Did you do student government?
I did. I was that annoying one.
I didn't say that. I just could see you doing student government.
I did.
You're organized, structured. Your calendar's color coded.
Don't mind bossing people around.
Exactly. You're a take charge kind of lady. I like it.
My brother, for a Christmas gift one year, gave me a compilation of music on a CD, and it was labeled something he had made for me, a playlist. Music that was popular while you were building the homecoming float.
Okay.
And because I wasn't with it and maybe always doing what other people viewed as fun, but it was my version of fun.
Hey, then you were having a good time. So, all right, high school, good experience. Yeah. Where did you go to college?
Vanderbilt.
Okay. How did you end up at Vanderbilt from little panhandle slice of heaven, Florida?
I did not know much. I was 17 years old. And although I had a super supportive set of parents and a mom particularly interested, she was the kind that helped me sort of maybe find one of every category. So I had my options open. So maybe one school that was more faith-based or religious, one that was an SEC school, one that was an Ivy League, one that was a private girls' school. So I kind of had one of every. And
you did a diverse.
Yeah, and different regions of the country. And then Vanderbilt felt like it was a little bit of a lot of those things.
Okay.
So I went 17 years old. I did not know a single human being.
No one from here went with you?
No, I didn't know anyone already there or that was there coming from here. And
really, that takes a lot of confidence for a young 17-year-old woman.
Naive. I really wasn't that confident. I didn't know everybody. Wasn't going to show up and not know a soul. And so I met people by going down to the bathroom on the dorm hall. It was a common bathroom. And I would just brush my teeth a lot so that I could meet people when I was in the bathroom and talk to them while I was brushing my teeth. And that's how I made friends.
Okay. I guess that's better than the bar.
Pretty soon I was, president of the dorm about a week later because I had met all those people brushing my teeth 16 times a day.
That's awesome. So, all right. Nashville is much different today than it was. Not trying to date anybody here, but age-wise, was it a town? Was it a school? Did you just crapshoot?
I would say Nashville was very secondary. I didn't look at it as the school was my focus, not the city at that time.
Because Vanderbilt's in Nashville.
Yeah, now Nashville really has so much more of an identity of a different kind, both business and industry. And for me, it was the right school. It had a little bit, as I said, of SEC sports. I could still claim, that I was going to be able to go to a football game, such as it was, and also find people from different parts of the country. And it was a good place for me to land.
I love it. Well, it's, I think, I went to Ole Miss, and our football team wasn't great for quite a bit, just like Vanderbilt, but now everybody's having a little more competitive.
I'm not.
Makes football season a little funner.
The biggest football fan, but when I was there, it was 1984, and Vanderbilt, when I was a sophomore, beat Alabama.
Oh.
And at the end of the fourth quarter, we were chanting sugar bowl, and then we were wild. We were very well dressed too, by the way.
Of course.
We were at a time that Laura Ashley dresses and tweed blazers, and then we never won another game after that season. And I'm not so sure my junior or senior year, but it's exactly 40 years later that Vanderbilt beat Alabama last year when the goalpost went into the river. And so I did cheer extra loud.
There you go. See, you pay attention a little bit. All right. So how was your college experience?
I had a college experience that probably was the foundation for what I would become interested in later in life. And I guess that's not all that surprising. A lot of us start to get our sea legs a little bit more.
Sure.
And I had a unique experience. I hope it's unique, that when I was a freshman in that dorm that I mentioned earlier, there was an incident on our campus that wasn't super publicized, but it somehow became known to me because I was president of the dorm, that another dorm had a swastika spray painted on it. And that made...
Just like outside or on somebody's door specifically?
Or, okay. I don't recall the location, but that...
they're targeting a single person.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Vanderbilt wasn't known for having many people of the Jewish faith. Wasn't known for having any minorities of any kind, to be candid. And so that enabled a discussion among the dorm presidents to examine, what drove somebody to do that. What was at a time where I was super naive. Again, I would just say I came from Fort Walton. I didn't know nothing about nothing.
Yeah.
In the big city. And, but as I sort of got dunked into understanding what did this mean and what drove this kind of hate towards somebody based on their religion, it brought out a small discussion group among the dorm presidents. And so the university chaplain at the time, a man named Reverend Beverly Asbury, he brought us together and kind of called on us. If you're going to be so-called leaders in this college community, you need to take a look at this. What's going on? And then that led me to be aware that Vanderbilt really was not even representative of the tiny bit of diversity I was exposed to that I mentioned earlier in Fort Walton Beach. And so that became something of interest to me. We formed what was called the Racial Environment Project, and that was a way of building awareness not just about issues involving race on campus and different ethnic and religious groups on campus, but also why they weren't more represented at that school.
Okay.
And so that became one part, and it was an election year, 1984, that I mentioned earlier, the same week that we beat Alabama. A person, because I do know that you're a lot younger than me, George, Geraldine Ferraro was the vice presidential candidate with a guy named Walter Mondale.
Uh-huh.
They were who were running for president and vice president in 84, and they came to Nashville. And I was asked to introduce Geraldine Ferraro when she came to Nashville. She wasn't just at Vanderbilt. She was in Nashville. And so I introduced her with the same fervor that the University of Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Geraldine Ferraro and Mondale are going to beat, I don't even remember who they were running against, to be honest, in 1984. I should be able to figure that out.
Ronald Reagan?
Maybe.
No.
So I had some exposure to things that way beyond Okaloosa County.
You got asked to introduce them?
Yes.
How were you still a freshman?
I was like a sophomore.
Okay. How did you go from dorm president to introducing the vice president candidate of the Democratic Party?
They were just looking for a little hippie,
that doesn't seem like a natural leap to me. You're leaving something out and selling yourself short.
Well, I would say some of those other issues that were bubbling up on campus that showed
that you started getting involved in.
People that care about issues of policy. that was starting to bubble up.
Okay.
Like I said, the whole busybody thing of high school, still part of my personality.
Would you consider back then, and you're not that much older than me, but I do know my history. Was it more of an activist type thing, or you said discussion group?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's a blend of idealism and activism, and some just, I don't think it's fair to call it academic, because we weren't all that academic on those topics. But I do think that we were ourselves just learning, right? 19, 20 years old, learning about what's going on in other people's lives that are very different from the way that we grew up and the lives that we were experiencing. And so I took a class, for example, in ethics. It was just a philosophy class. And you could take a subsection study, you were required to, and it might be ethics in the law, or ethics in business, ethics in the church. It could be any subject, and I chose ethics in poverty. And by that, I got to meet people that worked in fields associated with those that were just working with people who didn't have anything, which is a great contrast from most of the people that were at Vanderbilt. And that did introduce me to a little bit of Nashville that was maybe more covered up.
So you got off campus. There's like an interactive deal.
Yeah, and that was the first time I ever went to a soup kitchen. And
okay,
and people and serving there, and just finding out and breaking open the little bit of the castle that I lived in up until that point, and show me this is really the village outside. It's a lot more challenging. It's a lot harder. And then that class would introduce me to, I'm just going to use an example, a subject that I had to write a paper on, which was whether or not a food tax made sense. Like in Florida, we don't get taxed on normal food. You might get taxed on restaurant food, but not your groceries. And it was a food tax regressive, meaning is it punishing people more for their basic essentials? And is that the best way that you could set up a tax system? So I was starting to just get exposed to what, again, I'll call issues of policy and understanding what happens in real life and then what happens in government. And then that would start to influence my interest in those things after college.
Intriguing. So that class, I guess you got outside of Vanderbilt campus and got your hands dirty, if you will.
Right.
Because it's like my perception, I went to Ole Miss. So it's like, for years, even recently, Deep South considered school. But I always had the perception growing up in Memphis, Vanderbilt was a little higher standard, but they were still in the South. And I could see where the diversity is, like Nashville's nowhere near what it is today compared to them. But I don't know, maybe I had the perception because it was Vanderbilt that there was more than what you were talking about, what you experienced. But it sounds like you were kind of on the ground floor of opening the doors, if you will.
I didn't realize, I didn't know diversity was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that would not have even
you grew up in the environment you grew up in.
Yeah, I would not have even known that that's a characteristic that some people want or don't want. And but once I got there, it wasn't diversity for diversity's sake. And I think that's a really important part of the conversation then and now.
Yeah.
It's a part of, are you just aware of the different life experiences that people have had and what formed them, whether it's culture or religion or family or education. And that, to me, getting to know more people from different backgrounds made my experience more rich, just like I thought it had in Fort Walton in a much smaller way, that I had gotten more because I was able to go in my same class. There was a person who intellectually wasn't as developed as everybody else in the class. And you think, well, wasn't that holding back your learning,
Yeah.
And maybe in some ways and I'm sure our teachers always managed to put us where we needed to be, but did I learn more from being in class with that guy than I did from any book or any test I took? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to me, my own life was going to be enriched by having a little bit more exposure to the rest of the world that I had not yet lived in.
Well, if you understand people, you tend to appreciate it more and respect it.
Mm-hmm.
I have an uncle that grew up in Wyoming, ended up being in the Air Force. I think he retired as a colonel, but he didn't see an African American until he was 18 years old. Literally. And it's somewhat humorous. You have more diversity growing up in Fort Walton Beach than you did in Vanderbilt.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's kind of funny.
Right.
I grew up in Memphis, so we had plenty of diversity, but it's not 2 hours away from Nashville. It's different. So, all right. College clearly was an experience. I mean, you're introducing the potential vice president.
Definitely was not the vice president.
Yeah, the potential, the person running for vice president at 19 years old. Where do you go from there?
I had a lot of experiences like that, and I'm just going to say sometimes being lucky or being just having had crossing paths with the right teacher at the right time, and they need Gloria Steinem. I know she's not who you want to have lunch with, George Brandon, but Gloria Steinem, the publisher.
There's a mutual respect between us. You are my favorite Democrat. So,
but she was coming to campus, and I didn't know who she was. I just got invited to lunch, and when I look back now, and I realize I had lunch with Gloria Steinem because I was a young woman that was interested in some of the issues maybe she was interested in. But I'm going to say my naivete just kept carrying me. I did not, and we didn't have Google then to go, who is she?
Yeah.
And so
you had to actually read like an article?
Right. No, I didn't even do that. I just realized it maybe much later in life. So I continued to have those opportunities and take advantage of them. My dad's advice when I went to college was, you just go to everything that's free. And so I did that. Awesome. And so again, I was getting exposed to all kinds of people, speakers, musicians that I may not have ever gone to. So I do think that college gave me lots of opportunities, and the ones that were there, I took them.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And I'm sure there were some of those teachers or whoever, sometimes it's who you know, was recognizing something in you that they wanted you at the table. And
she's willing to talk. Just like you having me here.
Okay. Yeah, but I feel like you may be willing to talk, but you're also talking about something that other people are passionate about, and they want to hear your opinion. That's an amazing thing. So, all right, clearly you're on a path to where you're either going to be in politics or be an attorney. Does that sound about right?
When I was a senior in college, and you have to make that initial decision and about where the path's going to go, I actually, I wasn't at all at that point committed or even interested in law. I was, really? As I use that term, public policy, so something in government, more kind of a behind the scenes type. So I did look at those kinds of jobs, and I looked at the Peace Corps and seminary. Those were my different paths, and I took each one of those pretty seriously.
Okay.
And my analysis at the time was that I could get rid of the seminary option because I thought whatever my faith was in other parts of my life, I could always incorporate that. I didn't have to have that as my full-time vocation. Mm-hmm. If I really was having faith as an element of my life, then it would come out regardless of what job I had. I could practice that. So maybe that was one way of eliminating it. I heard a horror story or two about the Peace Corps that ended up making me look at jobs in government as probably the right place to blend my interest. And so I got my first job at, I guess I was 21, right when I graduated from college on a Saturday. On a Monday, I started my first job as a aide to Senator Lawton Chiles from Florida.
Okay.
He had an office in Washington and in Lakeland. And the Washington office wasn't ready for me. I went to the Lakeland office, and that's where he was also continuing his campaign to run again for the U.S. Senate. And so I could get both the campaign part of that life as well as the government staffer part of that life. And
was he, and I don't know this part, was he from North Florida?
No, he wasn't. He was from Lakeland.
Okay.
Central Florida.
Central Florida.
Right.
Okay.
And
still not Miami.
He was very much more, if you were to try to discern between North and South, he was had those North Florida characteristics.
Yeah. Some of those people further south, they don't even acknowledge that we're part of Florida.
He was very much a person that was old school Democrat, hunter, fisherman, and he became known. And many the old timers around these parts will know this, but I'll educate you, young George.
Please.
That I
like it when she says it. Let's just keep it real.
It sounds good. The way that he became known, because it was a little bit of a gimmick, he would say, but it was also a way of connecting people. He needed to become known to this very large state, even though it wasn't as populous when he first ran in the 70s. So he walked across the state of Florida, and he started in the very most northwestern tip of Florida in, I think it was Cantonment, not Pensacola, so as far as he could start. And he literally walked, and he became known as Walkin' Lawton. And
really?
Yeah. And then he made his way to the east and then south across the state of Florida, and sort of became known for an old pair of shoes that he wore, and he won. And he served several terms. I served on staff in his last term, and he decided rather abruptly not to run again, which became a big part of his future story when he would eventually become governor of Florida. Why he left, interestingly to me, he left at a time where we were seeing the first initial gridlock in Congress, that you had some people like him and Senator Sam Nunn from Georgia that were used to being able to have differences of opinion but still solve problems. And but he did not continue that campaign, and semi-retired for a little while, and dealt with some things in his own life, and then would surface again later on. So that was my first job for a couple of years. That
would have been Reagan's second term, late 80s?
Yes, it was 1987, 88-ish.
Yeah, okay. I was curious when you said like that first gridlock started. Like you look at today, and it's just, I shake my head at all of them. It's one of the big, I think personally, this is a total personal opinion, one of the big things we need to do is put term limits on congressmen and senators. And I know there's 10,000 arguments why we can't do that, but that's one of the things Scott ran on, and I don't think he's delivered. But anyway, I digress. So, all right, that was your first job. At what point, how long did you do that?
About 2 years.
So were you looking at law school? Were you?
No.
Did you have any?
No, I loved that job.
What was it like back then? Sorry, you keep calling me young, so I'm not trying to. We don't have a date now.
Back
so
when the horse and buggy came to pick me up to take me to
the guy
work.
You worked for walked across the state.
I'll tell you more about that later. It was a fantastic first job. It still is today. People that get the opportunity to be a staffer in Congress are getting, again, their eyes opened wide, as I was, to all kinds of people, both not just those who are already in the game of politics, but the people that are affected, which are the constituents, the voters, the individuals whose lives are affected by these laws. That's probably what I saw more up close and personal than I expected. And that did start to make law school an interest for me, because being part of the legislative branch, you're making the laws. But then there's this whole other, how are the people affected by these laws, that I felt like I wanted to help. And so when he decided not to run again or continue his campaign, that's when I decided to go to law school.
So go back just for a second, because I'm curious. is that you see it today, and you brought up like the gridlock, and that's maybe when it started, but it's just horrible today. But you were talking about, and it doesn't matter what party, but you were able to see your constituents. Is that because your team, your group, whatever, you literally went and saw them?
I would say that's the tone set both by the elected official who really, he knew where he came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he didn't feel above them. He was one of them. And he knew that how he got there.
Yeah.
There are these people that he would meet along the way, whether it was on the road or people that wrote and they needed a post office in their small town, or they were concerned about fishing regulations and whether they were going to be able to fish, for the fish
Snapper
they
season.
needed. Right. There are all kinds of, there's no end to the number of issues that affect people. And then he had a chief of staff. That was a wonderful first boss for me, Charles Kennedy, the father of Supreme Court Justice Charles Kennedy in Florida. Mr. Kennedy was my first boss, and I could not have had a military 3-star general be more demanding and commanding of his young staffers. And I am grateful for that. It set a work ethic for me for the rest of my life about how you're expected to work for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And but he cared. I think he's the one who set in place these standards of communication that you will be responsive to these constituents. They are who we work for. And that was simply the way it was.
Yeah. Do you think that's different today?
Long pause on a podcast doesn't sound good, but
It's okay.
I haven't.
We're not going to cut it out.
Probably, it is, because we're not looking at individuals as much as we're looking at positions, not people. We're looking at positions. But when you break down the position and you look at the people behind them or what matters to them that causes them to take that position, I think we become a lot more empathetic, and yet you can cross party lines and be a lot more effective as a leader, as a policymaker, as a person, as a friend, as a coworker. When you do what you're doing, you're listening to people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're finding out who they are, what makes them tick, why do they care so much about that? And if you can connect it to their story, then you usually have a lot more empathy and might be willing to consider helping in a way that you wouldn't if you just find out it's a position. Who's the person behind the position that interests me?
You said something about your boss and his chief of staff, and like he remembered where he came from. And I feel that's one thing a lot of our politicians, both sides, have forgotten. They don't listen. They don't get down, get their hands dirty, and not everybody. I'm painting with a broad brush, but I feel like that's part of the gridlock, because you're representing party lines as opposed to what's really best for Northwest Florida. It may not be best for South Florida. Mm-hmm. We have that problem here in this state, but then you add the whole country. It's crazy. So anyway, enough about the politics, but your party, you're dancing in that realm. Okay. So so what happened? He decided not to run abruptly.
So I did take that as a cue for law school based on what I shared with you earlier. And I, by then, was living in Florida and qualified for state tuition. And it was pretty easy if I was going on my own nickel that I'd be going to the University of Florida. So I'd be paying for Vanderbilt for a long time.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure.
I was paying for Vanderbilt for a long time. So.
Not a inexpensive school, but a very good school. So is it? And I don't know. This isn't a loaded question. Like, could you have gone on to another staff or another candidate, or?
Oh, yes.
I mean, or is that? It seems like a lot of people in that realm have at least gone to law school. Is that a must?
To go to law school?
Yeah, to be in that to play in that party.
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay.
I think it's just a pattern because you tend to find a lot of the personalities of people who like to read, maybe like to debate, maybe like to overanalyze, that there are some people, a lot, that do choose that path.
Law school welcomes you.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also think that you can easily find your niche within different policy realms without having that background.
Gotcha. Okay. So,
and yes, if I had not gone to law school, I'm sure I would have continued to work in DC in some sort of government related or policy related work.
Got it. All right. So now we've gone from being a Commodore to a Gator.
Yeah.
Right?
Did.
All right. So did you just easily get accepted and they're like, come on, Michelle, we like you?
I went to University of Florida. I don't know whether they said, come on, Michelle, we like you, but I was there.
Okay.
And I had 3 years of, I was never as obnoxious as they come in Gainesville, meaning football wasn't my biggest thing, but I'm still proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that I got to go to school in the state where I would ultimately spend the rest of my life and where I grew up.
Okay. Now, just because I know a little bit about your family, at least the second generation, did your dad encourage you?
My dad is like having Socrates as a father, meaning he just asks the questions. He gives no answers.
Okay.
And so he was very supportive of whatever I chose, particularly if I did it on my own nickel. I could do anything I wanted. So I
don't know your dad that well, but I feel like there's a reoccurring theme of frugality.
Yeah, there's a theme. Okay. And so he, I think, was glad, yes, though, and knew that we would always have that commonality. And he especially liked it because the day of my graduation was the day Fort Walton Beach High School played in the state finals in Gainesville, and Danny Werfel would be playing quarterback that day. So he left my graduation just as they called the last name so he could get to Florida Field on time to watch that game.
What a great story.
And my mom...
Fort Walton Beach was in the high school championship?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
And
didn't even have a football field at that time.
So we were proud of the Vikes and the Gators, and it was a good school for me, good lifelong friends that a lot of people make, particularly when you go to school in the state where you practice, that you're going to continue to cross paths for decades to come.
Okay.
And that's been true.
All right. I love it. I think it's cool you still have high school friends. I got 2 that I keep in touch with, which is sad. Anyway, all right. So you got that plaque to put on your wall. What are we doing with it?
I destroyed that plaque, actually, as I do all certificates and plaques. Just don't ever give me one. Those are the things that just pile up and don't mean anything. But the experience did, the education did. And so my first job outside of law school, if I remember correctly, is I got a sweet position. And again, very grateful for it. I was a law clerk at the Florida Supreme Court to Justice Parker Lee McDonald, who's now deceased. But each judge gets to have 2 law clerks to help support their work. And it's a fun job. You get to see the court acting at the highest level in the state and be a part of a very small family, because the justices are so mindful of maintaining their appropriate boundaries and ethics and not integrating too much with the lawyers that are practicing before them, and just keeping their noses clean, that and it was not very political then.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least not as political, I think, as the process has the perception of being now. And so the law clerks and their judges were all tucked away truly in an ivory tower. We really were. And so, again, it was an opportunity for good friends and good experiences that would shape me. Justice McDonald turned out to be like another grandfather to me, as well as a great mentor. Nice. And first boss professionally.
What is the benefit of being like a law clerk for a judge at that level right out of law school?
very much honed my writing skills, because the product of the court are judicial opinions, the appellate opinions that then really make the law. So the law is made up of statutes that are created by the legislature and the executive branch of government, whether that's state or federal. And then the other part of the law comes from what you hear is case law. What are the cases, and how does the court interpret those laws? How does it get put into action when you apply it to real world facts? When there's a dispute and people litigate and they go to a trial and they get a decision, and that decision goes up on appeal, eventually makes it to the Florida Supreme Court, then the court issues a written opinion discussing its position or the dissent for why, if you're one of the dissenting judges, which my judge frequently was, not part of the majority, then the judges write out their analysis and the reasons that they are coming to that conclusion, which gives people a real window into their thought process and helps understand how to apply the law in more situations. So the law clerks help prepare those opinions, but before that is going to become published and become the case law that guides our state for the future, it goes through a lot of refinement. And so I think that the refinement that I got in writing and thinking, and writing about what I'm thinking, was probably the most that I got out of it.
Well, you said refinement, and is it just you got two of you, right? Two clerks?
Right.
Is it just you two writing it? And then
for your judge. And then
your judge puts his eyes on it or hers.
Right.
And goes through it, and there we go. I'm sure it's more complicated.
It is. It's more complicated in that then the other judges discuss whether their opinion would be the better one to have published. Or do you have multiple opinions, or do you blend the different opinions? So each one can be a product of a different process depending on what the issue is.
Interesting.
And
is there any competition between the clerks?
There probably is, like there's competition in a lot of law offices, but not mine, because my co-clerk, bless her, only liked to work on capital cases, which is a euphemism for death penalty cases. And most people don't like to work on that. And she did. So she did all of that, and I got to do everything else. Okay. So we lived happily ever after.
For the team, I guess.
Right.
All right. So you did that for how long?
I did that for 2 years. Which is a standard time for a clerkship. And it coincided with his retirement.
Okay.
And so from there, I had another little stint. I'm not going to take you down what I did for a year and a half, but I had a stint before.
We can't just glaze over that.
I can. It was the beginning of me trying to figure out things in the world that mattered to me, that were of interest, and things that I actually maybe needed to do as a real job. So I went to work on a project at the Department of Revenue, which sounds terribly dull, which is why I was going to scoot over it. But that was when the child support enforcement system had moved from a state agency that just dealt with health and human services, more of a social work kind of place, and moved it to revenue. Like, let's go collect child support under the same roof where we collect taxes, because those people get it done.
Yeah.
And so it was a really good concept to try to go get the money with people who are good at getting money.
Yeah.
But how did the tax collector people ever take a beast like child support and integrate it into their system? So I worked on that project of integrating that for a year and a half. And then I got plucked from there. And
are you working for the state at this point?
Excuse me,
yeah, okay.
And that led me, though, to my next cool job.
Okay,
and
what
I
was
just
the next cool job?
Getting, I don't use the word blessed a lot, but I know that's what it was, that I was getting these neat opportunities to work with people, and I call them all my cranky old white men bosses that I continued to get that positively influenced my life forever. I went and worked in the general counsel's office for the governor. And that brings me back to Lawton Chiles had run for governor some years later and won. And I had worked on his campaign for governor during law school for one period and worked on the, quote, issues of that campaign. And another little fun fact about him and his campaign style and how different things are today, George, is that his so-called gimmick, except it really wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a for real piece of his identity and what he believed in, is when he ran that campaign in 1990 for governor, having taken off a few years from retiring from the U.S. Senate. He came back into that campaign and people were like, where were you? What happened to you? And he said, I was depressed. And he was one of the first public officials to come out and just admit that he had a mental health problem, which again, I'll say is part of getting to know the person, not just the position. You know, how much more people relate once they know who you are and, you know, what you're dealing with. And so he was very upfront with that. And that really shook up politics and in the public to say somebody's saying out loud. Now we're so much more accustomed to that. Maybe everyone.
A little too much.
Yeah, we're pretty generous on sharing
Sometimes
that.
people should keep the things to themselves.
Sometimes they shouldn't have a microphone in front of them in a podcast. But
I could see that though.
That was novel.
Yeah.
And it was important. And it really put mental health on the map for the first time in a meaningful way with a public figure. And so in addition to that, though, he had a very abbreviated campaign which began in the spring of 90 and until November. Yeah. And that's an interesting story in itself, but
did he just late to the game or?
Yes. And concerned that, the person running wasn't going to beat the incumbent at the time and that he thought he could. And so he joined late into the primary. And so, I mean, that's really somebody who felt a call to public service. Like, if I don't do this, who will? And so the reason I share that, though, is because he, again, needed to get out there, get known again, having taken off a little bit of time from the spotlight. And he said that he would only take $100 contributions. Wouldn't that make Setco and George Brannon happy?
Yeah,
you could only be asked for $100 contributions. Yes.
And I don't think that's a bad thing across the board these days. But anyway.
And he did it and successfully.
He stuck with it?
Yeah. He never took more than $100 in a contribution and won in a state as big as Florida. So that was also very radical for that time period. And he got a fair amount of free press from doing that. Yeah. But he also got a lot of respect, and then he was not ever overly attached to any particular person or entity or interest group. Yeah. Because he had only always taken the same amount from everyone. And he won. So I went to work for him again. Nice. Kind of round two in a different role and different position, eventually became the Deputy General Counsel in his second term as governor.
Okay. Now you're getting into the big leads.
Cool job. It was a good...
What does a Deputy General Counsel do? I mean, I know kind of generally what General Counsel do, but people listening.
So the General Counsel also became an incredibly important influence in my life, mentor. He was my Sunday school teacher, and a equal colleague, age and sage-wise, of Governor
Your
Chiles.
Boss?
Yeah, my
is your
boss.
Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know where to go to church. I figure out the right way. But he was the same age and stage as the governor.
Okay.
And so there was a big difference, obviously, between him and his practice and where I was, both in age and stage. So it is to support the legal work of the governor's office, but my specific opportunity, again, what I was just gifted with, was this huge, biggest litigation ever to swipe the state of Florida, which was a decision to fight the tobacco industry. And so we partnered with Mississippi.
The
Attorney Generals, right? The Attorney Generals of Mississippi and Florida locked elbows, and then picked up some others on the way. And they are the ones who filed the lawsuits, which is a much more complicated story in history, an interesting one. And then I got to focus on that a lot of the time that I was in the governor's office. And then through the settlement of that case, what happened when the funds, huge amounts of dollars suddenly coming in, who gets to decide where that's spent and on what. And then there were lots of attorney's fees battles going on for the attorneys who were needing to get paid for that. And so that's a lot of what I did. But I also worked in contrast to that on, and this really wasn't legal, but I just got my chance to work on issues that were important to Governor Chiles, and that was children's issues that affected the health and education of children at a young age, preventative health, things that could keep them from having trouble later if you dealt with them early. So I got a little bit of a bonus job in getting to do that at the same time I was doing.
Was that like under a certain department, or?
He just set it up. I had a nice title like children's coordinator for the governor.
Okay.
And but again, it's his way of trying to find ways to prioritize money and programming that will benefit kids and help them on the front end instead of having problems on the back end.
Well, you mentioned that. So the states locked arms against, as you said, the tobacco industry, and I am not as familiar with the minutia of it, but I know there's many attorneys who got very wealthy over that were not state employees.
No.
Is that because did the state outsource?
Yes.
Okay, got it. And did you become the gateway of who got paid?
So there are probably some podcasts from 20 years ago that argue about
podcasts.
This.
They didn't exist 20 years ago.
There's probably some old
something out there. I do remember in I would probably maybe elementary school or at least middle school, there was a famous actor about Philip Morris and those lawsuits, and there's a movie about it. But anyway, I'm sure there's many.
It's a really fascinating legal, political media study. Because the way that it happened in Florida was one line got written into a law that enabled the state to have what we call in the law a cause of action, which is a basis for a lawsuit against the tobacco industry because Medicaid money had been used to support people who were smokers and had healthcare problems as a result of smoking. So that was the tie-in. That's how Florida got its hook and had a basis for damages. We're the state. We support people through healthcare that have suffered damages from smoking. Therefore, we're entitled to money back for the damage that your smoking product has caused.
Okay.
But if that law, which was written by with the help of Fred Levin in Pensacola and W.D. Childers, a state representative from Pensacola. I mean, our little corner here had a huge impact on how that law got put into place. And then, instead of relying just on state lawyers in the Attorney General's office to fight an industry as well-funded as tobacco, the state hired lawyers on a contingency fee to say, if you'll take the risk of representing the state against the tobacco industry, then you'll get paid on the back end.
Okay.
But it did still erupt a bit into some confusion because the governor of Florida pretty much himself settled that case that brought in, I mean, he didn't litigate the case, but in the end, he was the poker player in the back room who found a way to get it settled. And then the lawyers are like, but what about us?
Is this your governor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Or Florida's governor, I should say. But
I'll call him mine.
You work
I'm
for.
proud. So that was huge. And then that money that came into the state, much like we've seen money come from other problems, whether it's, the oil spill or any other time that you've had an influx from a bad event, there's good that can come from it. And same with every once in a while lawyers come in handy.
Yeah.
Rarely, but sometimes it happens.
I'm a believer. You know this. So
That is the money that ended up funding a lot of education to warn kids about the dangers of tobacco. And it also had a lot of other purposes and roles.
did any get funneled to your, I don't want to call it pet project, but the child project that you were put in charge of?
Indirectly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
That's
I think
cool.
kids ultimately benefited in different ways from that. And so I think some of the effects of that money are still being enjoyed in the state of Florida. And that's probably 30 years later.
Yeah. Cool. I didn't know you were involved in all that. Pretty neat. All right. So
Yeah, it was
now we sued
fascinating-
tobacco companies. You're working for the governor. Now where are we going?
So
We're not even we're still in the 90s.
And I'm not back home yet, but that's about the time.
Are you living in Tallahassee?
Yes, I lived in Tallahassee, and that is about the time that after that role, and just before his term ended, Governor Chiles died unexpectedly.
Oh, he died in office?
He did, just weeks though before he would have retired, and that was right before Jeb Bush would become governor.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already decided probably at that time, it seemed like the most difficult decision I would ever make. I found out there were others to come that were hard, whether to move back to my hometown.
Okay.
But I was at a crossroads.
What was your hesitation?
I loved Tallahassee. I loved other places like DC. I had good friends. I had good jobs. I had no reason to leave, but I did feel like my soul was kind of magnetized back to this place I grew up, to where we started.
Was it the place or the game?
It was the people.
Okay.
It was family.
So it was like
it was family.
Political.
It was absolutely
involvement,
family.
if you will. I say game.
It was. How can I not be where these people are?
Got it. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
So, but I knew that it would, the jobs would not be as glitzy. The other things that, kind of make living in a place that has maybe some more options, fun. And I had made good friends and had good experiences along the way. But, so that's why it was difficult. I knew also that it was a difficult decision because once I got home, I was pretty sure I'd never leave. And that this place.
You don't be trapped in the vortex of the panhandle?
These people and this place would have its claws in me, and it would make it much harder to leave later. So I just took that decision very seriously.
Were you single at this time?
I was newly married.
Okay.
So I was, that was certainly part of it too. And drawing somebody who was open-minded. I mean, and I told you I'd tell you anything. And a year into marriage, going to counseling to decide this crucial kind of crossroads. Are we going to go? Are we going to stay? And
where's he from?
All over the South. I would say son of a Baptist minister, so had a fair amount of travel in him.
Got it.
But
not here.
And then the counselor says, "Let me talk to you, Michelle, by yourself." And I'm like, "I'm not the crazy one. You don't need to talk to me by myself." But it was actually, I recommend this because it was a really healthy conversation to just say, I just want to make sure you're not so attached to your family that you're not making, the right decisions and keeping your eyes open to other priorities you now have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved here, and my husband sort of, I think occasionally would act like he was a missionary, saying, when are we going back to the mainland? Like,
what did he do? Was he giving up a career in Tallahassee?
He wasn't giving up a career. He has a law career.
Okay.
So it wasn't a give up. It was just different.
Well, I didn't know if he had a path. I think I knew that part, but was he on some path that you were pulling him away from?
I would say not that. And that really was what I would call a pulling toward, was this place that would love us as well as all generations of my family had previously loved on their people.
It's a special place.
And so once I got here, I knew I would never leave.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because I was trapped. It was because I was happy.
I can see, I've talked to many people that have grown up here. Well, I say many, there's not a whole lot, present company excluded. It's healthy to go away, but when you grow up somewhere else, I had a very blessed childhood. But when you grow up in Memphis and then you move here, you realize how lucky you are to live here. Mm-hmm. It's a special place.
Mm-hmm. It was a good place to grow up. And then it was ultimately a good place for my children to grow up.
Of course. So, all right, we're back here.
Yeah.
Did you I'm moving home, no plan?
Total plan, of course. I'm a person with a plan usually. And I was lucky that my dad was a lawyer here. And so he was glad for me to have kind of learned somewhere else, but be ready to roll when I got here. And
so did he ask you formally in a question? Like, what'd you say? He's like Socrates?
Yeah.
How did this come about? Or did you have to ask him?
In that case, he handed me off to his partners.
Okay.
And so whatever recruiting or negotiating was done with them.
Got it.
And they have been like brothers to me for a lifetime. And so I moved back and practiced law with my dad for a very long time. And then ultimately, that next decision that I thought would never be harder than the first one came, which was whether or not to form an independent law firm. And so ultimately, two of my partners, Larry Keefe and Ben Gordon, and I did form a separate law firm that was a little bit more focused on litigation. And I was going to say we were just a little bit meaner, but it really is because the nature of litigation is more aggressive and more focused. And we are not trying to do what you do, close transactions and be nice to people all the time. We're representing people that are already usually in the hot seat or could be.
That's why you're my outside counsel.
So that's why. There are some people that just have to
Those
fight.
listening, yes. That's why she's awesome. Well, I bring up old history, but what did you do with Anchor Smith at the time?
Right.
Were you already in litigation, or they?
Yes, and I think that I got. I was pretty open-minded when I came. Wasn't really sure what I would do.
You hadn't really litigated to this point, right?
Right. And so I probably, I was okay at appeals because of my appellate court experience, but I had my eyes open to what needed to be done, what would be a good niche, what would be profitable. I would rather do something that needs doing than just only do something that I liked, if that was possible. But I kind of found out after trying a few of those things that didn't interest me that much. Like my dad says, there needs to be somebody who does elder law around here. So I did it for a few hours, and then I decided
elder law,
law, like helping people with it's not just estate planning; it's more
transaction,
asset protection of
elder. Now I get it. God.
But
so tactful, Michelle.
After a while, I think a lot of it, is sometimes happenstance. And I did have some advocacy skills that were developed by my partner who needed help. Larry Keefe needed help. And so I could step in and we could rock and roll together. And so I could learn that part of the law and did that for a long time.
With him. And then what was the trigger for other than just y'all were tougher?
Not tougher. I just said meaner.
Okay.
So
that had to be difficult.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
How'd that conversation go with Dad?
It was for me, and I can torture a decision when I'm afraid that it's going to impact others. But my dad is very magnanimous, and I wanted me to do what was right for my family and my future. And so when I chose that, maybe surprised what that was, but it was also hard because I just loved the people. Like I said, they are my brothers, and so this the beauty of starting something that is your own, with your own freshness and your own energy and your own values and your own ideas is attractive. It's just like starting your own business of any kind.
Sure.
And so we had the opportunity to launch that and make it a smooth transition, and that's what it was.
Okay. So now we're
yeah. So that was the birth of Keefe Anchors and Gordon, and as I said, two partners I had practiced with for a while and trusted completely, and so we were a small kind of litigation boutique firm focused on real estate business kind of issues.
And then one of those partners became, I mean, y'all spin off judges every other year, don't you?
Well, some make their way through the doors, and then now we're starting to have to contract on, like, you got to stay 2 years before you become something famous. But yes, when Larry became the U.S. attorney and was appointed to that in I think his first day was maybe 2020 or 2019. Then my partner Ben Gordon and I, who I'm also proud to call my first cousin, we were,
I didn't know that.
yeah, we were continued again, I would say pretty seamlessly, because we've all worked really well together for so long that we continued to do what we do. And we like to think we're sort of this isn't good for everybody, Ritz-Carlton for lawyers, but, want to really deliver a high quality product because that's what people are paying for. And that if you put that kind of work into it, and we're smaller and focused, but we know our people, we like our team. And I think it's worked for a long time now. I'm grateful to have the team that I'm a part of.
I can attest that they're very good at it. And I kind of like that Ritz-Carlton feel. So what is your wheelhouse? Like and how did you gravitate towards that?
So that's a journey into the present. I have, after litigation, and while I was litigating, even though I always would do some other things I call general counsel work, which is what I like to do for small companies that need to keep themselves out of trouble. You still need what I call your primary care doctor to kind of keep you healthy. You need to do your exercise. Let's make sure that you're eating right, get some basics to keep you healthy. I appreciate
all your recommendations, Doc.
Yes. I don't want you in surgery, but if you go to surgery, then here's my partners.
Okay.
And then sometimes when you're in surgery, which is what I will call the medical equivalent of litigation, you're in a real dogfight. I found that sometimes I would see what I will call a solution, and it may be a run down the middle with the ball. Why don't we solve the problem this way? Well, it is a good way of solving a problem, but it's not litigation because it doesn't mean you're going to fight to the death.
Or your financial death in some cases.
Sometimes it is that. Yeah. And that is part of why it just made so much sense to me. Like, what if we could solve the problem this way? It's faster, it's cheaper, it's not perfect, it's not a total victory, but sometimes when you get to total victory in the courtroom, you have lost in other ways. And you don't always feel like a winner just because you won. So that led me to my practice, which is mediation, to serve as the neutral between disputing parties. And so I primarily now consider the lawyers are my clients because they're the ones who've got the litigating parties, and they're looking for a third party neutral who can not sit them down at the same table. We're not at the same table. We're at different tables. Yeah. Trying to see if we can find a way to not necessarily make anybody friends in the end, but can we come to a resolution that gets you both down the road with a little more of what you need without going to what I call the death in the courtroom experience.
Yeah.
So I mediate.
Zoom has done wonders for mediation. Where you talk about not sitting at the same table. I remember, it's not the olden days, but where, you got 3 rooms and your role is bouncing back and forth between each room. Now you can just do it all on a video screen.
I do both. And I love still doing it in person. Sometimes it's a hybrid of both. But even if we're in person, we rarely the adversaries don't have to be with each other. I am with each of them. And I find that really I argue and advocate more than I ever did in other parts of my practice, because you're really trying to work directly with. I'm not their lawyer. I don't have to make them happy.
Yeah.
I can just tell it like it is. Problem. And I can be a little bit more candid about what I call the blind spots of their position, the weak spots, the strong spots, but make them face that before they face a judge or a jury who are going to decide it for them.
And you're only doing mediation now?
Not only, but
you're not
predominantly.
You're not litigating.
No, I'm not
near as much as
and
you
I
used
found
to.
and I made that a conscious decision because I wanted lawyers to be able to trust that if I am their mediator, I'm not looking at them with a side eye of how are they handling something. Because trust is a critical element of a good mediation. You need to know that conversation is tight and that there's not being used for any other purpose. And so for me, I just felt like I could have that more direct, candid, trusted conversation if I'm not litigating.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah, that's smart. Is shocking, I know. In there, and I don't know when this happened, but don't you have to mediate?
Yeah.
Now?
Most of every court case, the judge is going to order it to mediation at some point.
So is that a judge order? Or was that part of the timeline thing they got implemented?
Both.
Okay.
And I think that the timing, though, of when it happens, some lawyers are looking at a dispute before it ever goes to court and saying, we should mediate this first. We should do it early. And that has its advantages. It's not perfect because sometimes it's just not enough evidence that's been developed to make that early mediation worth it. But if the facts can be sort of figured out enough that you can have a meaningful discussion, then you're saving attorney's fees. And it's worth it to do it early. But sometimes it's happening weeks before trial or days before trial.
The counsel making that decision,
right.
Like an early mediation.
Right, or recommending it usually.
But
that's right.
They would have to agree.
That's right. It's voluntary.
Judge order. Okay.
That's right.
Cool. All right.
Both.
Well, so I just have a few questions about real estate.
Okay.
And if you just tell me, no, I'm not comfortable. Pass.
I'm going to pass it to a smarter lawyer.
Whatever. You said part of what y'all do is real estate. That was kind of your wheelhouse to some extent. And then I know Ben does a lot of business stuff, and you've got a great real estate team. What are some of the biggest mistakes buyers and sellers make with a contract?
Not showing them to a lawyer.
Okay. That was a great answer. Okay, moving on. Is there anything about
really some of those words at the end that get added on in an addendum and they're precise? That's sometimes where you see a dispute or not really understanding how this is going to work with the due diligence period and what can and can't be done during that period.
Well, knowing what you have shared and what, of course, I knew before, you're seeing it as kind of the mediator. You're middle of the road. Your job is to get them to a finish line. Not everybody's going to agree to that finish line, or not everybody may be happy with that finish line, but at least you're to the finish line where maybe, each party isn't spending thousands and not hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney fees. I definitely think there's value in mediating, being, unfortunately been involved in multiple lawsuits around real estate. But that's just part of doing business. So what is the one part of the contract that you would suggest everyone pay attention to?
Mediate first.
Mediate first?
Before you litigate.
Okay.
Really?
As you know, I occasionally will talk to people, not legal advice, but give them explain their rights under the contract if they're even disputing an EMD. And my standard line is, if it's under $10,000, this is not worth fighting over. Because I can tell you, by the time you write your first letter, you're $500 in, your attorney, and then they've written a letter. Now we're $1,000 in, 10 more hours and the money's gone, and the attorneys get everything. So, that's my standard go-to. But if it comes to that, I always say the same thing. Go mediate. You're not going to, unless you're dealing with a commercial property that's got $1 million EMD, people do not win on that. So anyway, you answered. So what are the most things you see being litigated in real estate today?
That's interesting to think about. I'm surprised. I'm not going to say this is the most, but I have been a little surprised at what I will call a cottage industry, something that kind of cropped up. And that is the special assessments that are being imposed on a lot of condominiums as a result of the structural integrity reserve law. So as probably some of your listeners know, when Florida dealt with the catastrophe of a crashing down condo building in South Florida and Surfside, and then the legislature passed a law that required all condominiums to do some inspections that made sure their structural integrity was intact of those buildings, and then fund their reserves to fix major problems at a certain level and not underfund those. To get everybody to the place they needed to be, condominiums are having to consider more special assessments to have the funds to fully fund their reserves. I've seen a number of cases where the seller hasn't yet become fully responsible for the special assessment. It's in process of being imposed. The board's thinking about it. It hasn't become formally discussed, or it's been discussed but not approved. Where it's somewhere out there being discussed. And then they answer a question in the contracting process that leads the buyer to believe there is no special assessment forthcoming. And then when the buyer buys and they find out at some point a special assessment's been approved and that a buyer is going to be responsible for that, sometimes it's a sporty price.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the level of the reserve need. And then buyer sues seller because they felt like that was not disclosed and it was known by the seller. So that, and related to that are all things related to defects and disclosures, and not knowing. And that's not really the real estate contract itself.
Yeah.
It's the real estate transaction where that one becomes just a black hole of money to determine whether the seller knew or should have known about a defect, should they have disclosed it in the contract. And by defect, I don't mean something, it doesn't always have to be huge. It can just be something enough to cause a problem that affects the value of the home to the buyer. So those kind of disclosure cases, we still see a lot of those, and they've been going on. Those have been going on forever, and they're just still out there. It makes me paranoid to think about selling a house, because can you ever fully know, should I tell them about the squeaky faucet?
Yeah.
Does that count? So really trying to make sure that you've done your best to disclose that which you're obligated to, and still maintain the value of your home or your
get a home
property.
inspection.
Yeah.
It'll help some, but we have seen the special assessment scenario because, of course, guess who gets put in between it? And it's tricky because, contractually, it's if the board has not ratified the special assessment, it's not on the seller. But in some of these cases, you've got these reports floating out there. We actually had my friend Robert Hinojosa with RJH and Associates, who is an expert on this. He's an engineer and does these reports, but the board may not do anything about it for 2 years, whatever it is. So it becomes tricky.
Everybody just, has to do extra homework, get all the minutes, get all.
Have your attorney review it.
Have your attorney review.
No problem with that. All right. What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think a mama's always going to be wondering about her youngins.
What is it? About the real estate market specifically, Michelle.
I care not about real estate when I have two kids. But in terms of, I try not to let too much these
Good
days. Now, I haven't always been that way, but that's something that comes with a little bit of seasoning is being able to put things in perspective and care about the are we healthy?
Yeah.
Are we generally happy? And are we generally free? And if you can get to those things, then the real estate contract matters just ever so slightly less.
All right. So enough of the legal questions. I had just one. Oh, wait. No, I have one more. I have to ask you about this one because you've helped me with this type of stuff. What's the most common legal disputes when regards to HOAs that you see?
What's the most common
legal disputes with involve homeowner association? Or is that just there's so many?
So many. There are so many. Do you have one in mind?
No, it wasn't a loaded question.
There are so many. And that's one that if you just don't like a lot of rules, get a house without a gate and no assessments.
Okay. Don't buy with the homeowner association. I will ask a more specific question. You have a set of rules, which is restrictive covenants in a homeowner association. If those rules are selectively implemented, is that allowed?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was just curious.
And by selectively enforce, what we really mean is, frankly, you can enforce one rule and not another. But let's say that the rule is, does everybody have to have a pink fence in the neighborhood? If you let one person have a purple fence and everyone else has to have a pink fence, then, or vice versa, you're only punishing, there are two purple fences. I didn't use a great example. You got to go after both homes with purple fence. You can't just let one slide. Yeah. And so the reason I distinguish between that is because if you had another rule that has to do with whether you can put a boat on your carport, that's a different rule. And if they don't enforce that, that's not the same as selective enforcement among owners. So it's the same rule. You got to be selectively enforcing or not enforcing the same rule.
Got it. You're talking about the fence and the boat.
Yeah, those are two different rules. It's not like you're selectively enforcing one rule and not the other.
Got it.
So thanks for working with me on that. It was a complicated, simple question, but a complicated answer.
You got a boat in your driveway? And your neighbor's got a boat in their driveway. We're not supposed to have boats. They either got to tell us to move them, or you can't take one of the other.
The same.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. I run into that a lot. Not personally. Well, I guess I probably have personally too. But people asking us just through the closing process. Well, this neighbor's doing this and this neighbor's doing that, and I'm not going to be the legal advice. Not that I could of the homeowner association. So I usually. Like, you need to read your restrictive covenants. You need to talk to your HOA board.
And then it's like all things, once you're in it, whether you choose to get more involved in it, you may influence something in a positive way, but it takes a lot of work, as you know. I call the people who serve on boards of directors, I put them in one of two categories. They're either saints or they're insane. And I usually wait till I meet them, get to know them to decide which one they are.
Well, you can let me know which one I'm in. But the ones I like the most are the retirees that don't have anything else to do. And that's their job. And I still have a day job.
One thing, though, that we have in Northwest Florida and a lot in Walton County is I've worked with some of the brightest, most brilliant board members because they did run huge companies in other places in this country and had a different life before they retired here. And they found out that whether playing golf wasn't enough or they just wanted to get involved because they cared or because they were angry, whatever their motivation is, that we're getting people with extraordinary talent, whether it's accounting or logistics or law, whatever business, whatever they came from. Now, yes, does that mean
those aren't the ones I'm talking about?
But that's a gift that I've gotten to work with people in a volunteer role, which is why I used to like working with nonprofit homeowners boards of directors, because they chose that job.
Yeah.
They're not doing it because they have to.
Yeah. All right. What's next for Michelle? What's next 5 years? Are you just going to mediate out into the sunset or what?
I'm going to mediate, but I also, I wake up every morning with this quote from E.B. White. E.B. White, who wrote Charlotte's Web. Remember that great book? And I won't get it exactly right, but he says he wakes up every morning with the challenge of figuring out, it's a beautiful world out there. But there's a lot of problems. So whether I should go try to change it or enjoy it, that's the problem with planning my day. And so I hope I do a little bit of both, a little bit of changing it and a little bit of enjoying it.
Is there any potential venture back into the political arena at all? Anyway?
If there is, it shall never be known. It will always be underground.
You are in the back office stage of your life. Okay.
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Michelle, you are wonderful. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, George.
All right. Bye, guys.